Welcome back to Switch Point, and we're here for episode 4, and we're done with Nintendo Switch 2. We're done. There's nothing more to talk about. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. I think we've covered all the major points up until April when we find out more concrete information. We've covered the launch year, potential release date, potential price, what players can maybe expect from games coming in the future. I don't think we've got anything left to talk about until April.
I mean, honestly, Nintendo, you might as well just not release the Switch 2 at this point. But today we're going to kind of switch it up and we're going to change things up and look back at the past. And we want to talk about 3DS games. And specifically with these, what 3DS games deserve a second life? Now, as you know, we've seen quite a few 3DS games make the jump to Switch. The one that seems to be in my head the most right now is Luigi's Mansion 2 Dark Moon. But there's like dozens and dozens of games that I'd personally like to see on Switch too, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. So, Cyrus, why don't you start us off? What game would you like to see on Switch 2?
Well, we've already alluded to it in the past. I think the number one game I would really like to see on the Switch 2 is Codename Steam. No, I would love to see Tomodachi Life. Tomodachi Life is probably one of my favorite simulator games of all time. To me, it was such a great guilty pleasure to play when I was younger, and I spent hours in that game creating me's out of my friends, out of fictional characters, seeing them get matched up, seeing them sing random songs. It's an experience I'll never forget. And bringing that to the Switch, especially with the recent success of Metopia, just kind of feels like a no-brainer.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, Tomodachi Life was pretty big when it first hit, and I definitely am interested to see kind of what games like that we might see on Switch 2, and what better way to kind of, put an entry out there than to just remaster and bring that game up to Switch 2 for new players.
Yes, for sure. I think again with how well Metopia did, it wouldn't be the most difficult port in the world. Hard to say, but I think it is a title that would have a lot of potential, especially with how well similar games like Animal Crossing New Horizons did. I think in the meantime, until we have to wait for whenever the next Animal Crossing game comes out, a simulator game like this, especially with me functionality, would be great.
No, I definitely agree. I mean, I think that overall, you're talking about a game that really has the potential to be big in the masses. And, let's be honest, Tomodachi Life did all right on 3DS, but I think that's a game that could really succeed past where it was on a Nintendo Switch system.
Yep, absolutely. And especially with the demographic of the Switch and being able to play it both on the go and on the TV would be a huge game changer for a game like this. So yeah, I think that's probably at the top of my list when it comes to 3DS games I would want to see on the Switch too. So how about you? What's your big
That's the
game?
top of your list. I'm not going to laugh, I promise. I respect opinions. For me, it has to be Kid Icarus Uprising. And I know this is like the generic answer for so many people, but I'm going to be real for a second. All these people online who talk about Kid Icarus Uprising, I don't believe that you've played it. I don't. Because there's a lot of people out there that talk about certain mechanics in the game that just aren't there and talk about this and that and how it would be so easy to port it to Switch. I don't think it's going to be an easy port, but I think they need to do it. And I think, especially with Switch 2, we know about, the mouse stuff now. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think that would be such a fun port to bring over. And let's be honest, like Kid Icarus, that game, Kid Icarus Uprising, to bring back and, basically revitalize this franchise that had just been forgotten essentially, right? So cool. And Sakurai, was a huge part of that game. And just the way that that game played out and all the stuff it brought to the table was so unique. And we've not seen anything like it since. And I just think it would be such a fun way to, bring a new experience to so many millions of people to Switch 2. And again, like I want a sequel, and I think that's the best way to do it. Let's be honest.
Absolutely. Kid Icarus Uprising is another big one when it comes to games that people would love to see from the 3DS come back to the Nintendo Switch. Especially with, as you said, the mouse functionality. I've been speculating for a while that there's a chance that the mouse could potentially work as a maybe spiritual successor to the stylus and touchscreen on the DS. Not to the same extent as the Nintendo Switch's own touchscreen, but you know what I mean. So having that be implemented with the tracking controls and the shooter mechanics on Kid Icarus would be great. And to many people, that is still considered the 3DS's killer app. And at the same time, it's very much a cult classic. It's a game that everyone talks about, but like you said, not many people have played. Bringing it to the Switch 2 seems like a no-brainer because that is a way to get one of Nintendo's arguably best games in the last 15 years or so to a new system. And it will definitely breathe new life into the Kid Icarus franchise, especially with, hey, maybe we can get a sequel at this point.
Right. And I think with Switch 2, I mean, you have the potential to fix what so many people consider the worst part of that game, the controls. I mean, I think about all these people that complained about, oh, I hated the controls. I didn't like the way it felt here or there. You can take out the touchscreen element and simply, make it analog, and it's going to go across a lot better, I think. Again, it's going to take a lot of work, but I just think that, Pit and Palutena, all these characters that are in this game were so well done, and I just want to see more of it. And it seems like a shame to keep that on 3DS forever. It really does. And especially now, right? We're in a different time. I mean, 3DS was kind of like the similar console to the Switch 2 in a way, because it was the follow up to the DS, and you could play all the DS games on it. So for Switch 2, it's the follow up to the Switch, and you can play all the Switch games on it. And so, really, in my mind, it's like there's so many games on 3DS that I want to see brought over because really, like, this is the time to make the ultimate Nintendo library. And, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, oh, this is the better library or this, because in my opinion, like, let's be real, the Switch is Nintendo's best library. I mean, I don't know how people can argue that at this point, but I will say, like, I think these 3DS games that potentially could come over could really solidify it as not just Nintendo's best library, but the best library of all time. I mean, seriously, like, let's think about it for a second.
Yeah, I definitely agree, especially with how robust the Switch One's library has been with porting over games from the Wii U and starting to port over games from the 3DS. I think with the Switch 2 having the ability to play games from the Switch, it could easily become one of, if not the greatest video game libraries of all time. And Kid Icarus Uprising just makes sense, especially with how they approached a similar game with similar problems with controls, Metroid Prime Remastered. That was a game that had its own control problems, especially when it was ported to the Wii. And the remastered version of Metroid Prime has a lot of similarities with the Wii version versus the original GameCube version with the new additions to the story and all that. But they managed to include so many different controller options with the GameCube controller, the motion control options, and of course, analog control. And if they approach that same style with Kid Icarus Uprising, you'd kind of have a match made in heaven. So yeah, I definitely agreed that the 3DS had a fantastic library, but it wasn't a library that was really appreciated very much. Not until years after its launch and after its catalog sort of came to an end. Now is the best time to bring that library back into the forefront.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of great points there. And overall, again, I mean, this is about enhancing the experience found on 3DS and bringing it forward for new players. I think Kid Icarus Uprising is one of those games that just has to happen. It has to. And, I think about that game, but also And this isn't a game that I think a lot of people would necessarily say is at the top of their list, but for me it is. And that's Super Mario 3D Land.
True that, especially if they add in a sort of Bowser's Fury esque expansion to it, maybe new levels. Not maybe to the same extent as Bowser's Fury, but still something ambitious and perhaps interesting enough to make people want to try out the different sort of game compared to 3D World.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the thing. You have to think about like overall the 3DS audience and what they played and what they didn't play. And, a lot of copies sold for 3D Land. But in my mind, I just think that that's a game that went underappreciated. And, that's kind of the theme with this episode, right? We want to find these games that were underappreciated and bring them forward to Switch 2. And for me, I mean, I think that's just one that has to happen. 3D Land had a lot going for it. It was like, I'm pretty sure it was the first 3D Mario to really utilize the Tanuki suit, right?
Yes, it was. And it was the first time I believe the Tanuki suit had even been utilized since Super Mario 3.
Yeah. No, it's really nice. I mean, they also had a bunch of other stuff. I mean, I think that people see the game as bland. A lot of people do, and I think that's fair. But I just think that again, bringing it forward would be really nice. And for me, it's like, we could talk about Wii games another time, but like the fact that you can play 64 Sunshine Galaxy if you are an owner of 3D All Stars, which if you aren't, that's your fault. But 64, Sunshine, Galaxy, Odyssey, all the older Mario games, and it's like we're missing and 3D World, and we're missing Galaxy 2 and 3D Land, right? That's it. So it's like for me, I want to have the complete collection available on Switch too, even if 3D Land is nowhere near my favorite 3D Mario, right?
Yeah, definitely. A 3D All Stars 2 would be great. Maybe one that's actually not available for a limited time would be great. I did manage to get a 3D All Stars. A friend lent it to me, and I never gave it back to him, and I never will. Um, but yeah, I definitely agreed that 3D Land is a game that would absolutely have new potential on a Switch 2. Now, this actually raises an interesting question of similar games that people think would be sort of obsolete on the Switch 2 because of other similar games that are already on the Switch. The immediate examples that come to mind are games like New Super Mario Bros. 2, Fire Emblem Awakening, Fire Emblem Fates, which already have, big successors. In terms of Awakening and Fates, I would love to see a full on remaster, but I'd be curious to see the extent they'd go with it compared to what they've already established with Three Houses and Engage.
Yeah, I mean, I have a question. Have you played those games?
I have played. No, I actually haven't.
Okay, yeah. So there's definitely a lot to love with Fates, Echoes, Awakening, all that. And I think that obviously, yes, I want those games on Switch solely because, let's be honest, we don't have enough Fire Emblem right now. We have the original game that came out as part of that anniversary thing. We've got Three Houses and we've got Engage. And I don't care. Go tell me otherwise, people in the comments. I loved Engage. I thought Engage was a great game. You were expecting things otherwise. I thought it was a fun game. I think it was a good take on Fire Emblem that was unique and new and fresh. But point aside, yes, we need more Fire Emblem on the Switch library. And I think this is a great place to start. I mean, you bring those three games over, and let's be honest, as someone who played all of them, like there's definitely areas that I hope are improved. And I hope that they learn from Three Houses and kind of, make them more of just a port and bring them into like an actual remaster with enhanced features. But yeah, I mean, I think it makes so much sense. I mean, with Fates, you could do, Fates is great. And I think that, I don't know, man, there's so many good Fire Emblem games. The 3DS ones were really good. And I hope that they come over because I just think that more people should experience that series and that franchise. And overall, like Fire Emblem right now is still really quickly growing. And it's crazy that we'll probably be getting the new one within the first 2 years of Switch 2. So that's also something we have to consider.
Yeah, definitely. And I've always wanted to play those Fire Emblem games. Especially Echoes was the one I heard the most positive reception around, and of course Awakening. Um, but yeah, I think bringing them over to the Switch 2 would make a lot of sense. And there's not really too much. I realistically, most people would probably not be quote unquote upset with how different it is, maybe compared to, Three Houses or Engage. Now, on the flip side, a game like New Super Mario Bros. 2 absolutely does not need to be brought to the Switch 2. I'm sorry to any hardcore New Super Mario Bros. 2 fans out there, but as much as I loved the New Super Mario Bros. Games on the DS and Wii, we can leave that art style in the past, especially with the release of games like Wonder.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. It's like I played all the new Super Mario Bros. Games when I was younger and I had a 3DS, and I enjoyed them, but New Super Mario Bros. 2, in my opinion at least, is the low point of the series because it was just so creatively uninspired and you literally just went around collecting coins. Like, I don't know. Call me crazy. That was my least favorite entry. I want it nowhere near the Switch.
Yeah, agreed. Even just from what I saw from a distance, it was not exactly the most compelling game. Didn't have really any creative stuff with the platformers and the platforming levels and things like that compared to DS, Wii, and even the Wii U version. So yeah, we don't need that game on the Switch too. Now, a game we do probably need on the Switch 2 is one that I'm pretty sure we're already going to get is Kirby Planet Robobot. That's a no-brainer, right? That is arguably one of the best Kirby games in general. And I definitely think that is coming to the Switch too. However, I also want to see Triple Deluxe because that's another really great game. And I have a feeling we're probably going to see Planet Robobot come on its own, but Triple Deluxe and Kirby Planet Robobot together would be great. Maybe they could call it a Kirby Triple Deluxe Deluxe or something like that.
No, they want to charge you for each of them. Nintendo's not going to let you they're not going to let you pay for those as a bundle. They're going to charge you $60 for each of them. You know it.
Yeah, especially considering what they did with the Metroid Prime Remastered. I mean, we had rumors for years that we'd get a collection of all three Metroid Prime games. And instead, we got Metroid Prime Remastered for the original one. And who knows when 2 and 3 are coming out.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's an interesting case, right? Because MP Remastered had a lot going for it in terms of the technicality and all the stuff they put to the Switch. It was not a quick project. They put a lot of work into it. So with that game, they definitely wanted to recoup costs, obviously, right? And I understand them putting that as a separate thing. And the rumor forever has been, okay, well, Prime Remastered is its own thing. So we're going to see Prime 2 and 3 as kind of a collection come in because those games didn't receive as much attention. But then I kind of sit back and I'm like, yeah, Prime 3 needs a lot done to it. Prime 2, yeah, you could just simply do a graphics overhaul, but still, I don't know. At this point, I feel like separate releases for all three would be possible. And I'll be honest, as a collector, I would kind of prefer that. So I have three separate games instead of just two. But that's just me. But anyways, besides the point, yeah, Kirby makes a lot of sense. Nintendo does not shy away from the amount of Kirby love that we get every year. You're basically guaranteed a new entry every year, and for this one, obviously for 2025, it is with the utmost certainty it is Robobot, and I wouldn't be surprised to see that be the May game potentially, maybe April. I don't know, just depends. Still kind of believe that we're going to see some sort of direct this month, so I think that that's probably where that'll get revealed. But I think yeah, Triple Deluxe is an interesting one. I don't expect it to come out this year. But I think it makes a lot of sense for like a, year 3, year 4 title. At that point, it'll be over 10 years old or around there, which is scary. But really, beyond the point, we're definitely going to have a new 2D Kirby and a new 3D Kirby coming, right? So for Nintendo, you're not going to have all these gap years of, oh, we're not going to release Kirby for 4 years because we're waiting for a new game. No, you're going to go back to the catalog. And so bring over Triple Deluxe and also bring over the other Kirby games that I'm not going to talk about today because I could talk about them for 2 hours. But yeah, bring over the Kirby games. We'll play them all. We'll buy them all. They're all great. They're all fun. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, you can never really go wrong with Kirby. There's a reason it has that reputation of being one of the most consistently perfect Nintendo franchises, arguably one of the most consistently perfect franchises in general. And yeah, I think Planet Robobot and Triple Deluxe would be great. And I think that would mark pretty much every single Kirby game available on one platform, except for the DS games. And trust me, we will absolutely cross that bridge when we get to it. I honestly really want to see the remastered versions of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Now, I know what you're thinking. We
No.
already have. Yeah, we
No.
already have
I'm
Ocarina.
selling I'm saying no.
Yeah, to be fair, we already have Ocarina of Time on the Nintendo 64 catalog. And do we have Majora's Mask? I don't remember.
God, I to be honest, I'm probably the wrong person to be asking about this. I'm 95% sure that it is available. Yeah, it's available online. Yeah, I don't know why I even hesitated. Yeah, I don't honestly play much of the N64 online, so I'm a bad person to ask, but yes, it is available.
Yeah, well, in that case, it's more of a pipe dream than anything. It would probably be more a case of Nintendo wanting to make more money, but even that seems below them in a lot of ways.
Here's what's going to happen with those two games, and I'll tell you right now. If Nintendo is ever going to remake either one, it's going to happen on Switch 2. So put the remasters aside. If we see an Ocarina of Time remake or a Majora's Mask remake, it's going to be for Switch 2. So that's something at least to keep in mind. I I don't want the 3DS. Like, I don't want them. I'm sorry. I just simply don't want them. We already have them playable. But a remake would be interesting. But again, I want new games. But Nintendo, you got to supplement with games available here and there. I still am waiting on Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. But yeah, I mean, I think if we get those games in any form, in a new way, it's going to be a remake.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I would be so down for a remake, especially with Majora's Mask. So, in that case, what's another 3DS game you would really like to see come over to the Switch too?
Oh man, now I'm getting into like thinking about the the details here. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think we got to stick with the Zelda stuff. I've got to say, A Link Between Worlds. I think that game was so unique, and it's one of the best games on 3DS. And I think Switch has plenty of 2D Zelda, but I would like to see that game brought over. I think Echoes of Wisdom was really good. I thought the Link's Awakening remake was really good, but for me, it's like let's get back to those kind of games with A Link Between Worlds and bring them over because those were really special. And again, I think that's a game that not enough people played, regardless of how many copies it sold. I think that could be a 20 million seller for Nintendo. It's that good.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Link Between Worlds is honestly what's still one of my favorite Zelda games, and I would love to see that come over to the Switch too, especially if the team behind Link's Awakening and Echoes of Wisdom work on it. I think they would be a perfect match for that style. And yeah, I think that might be a no-brainer too, I think that's something that Nintendo probably wants to think about a bit in terms of if they continue their trend of perhaps remastering old titles. Now, in terms of other games I would like to see, well, actually, let's stick with a game that I don't think we'll see. I do not think we're going to see any of the Pokemon games on 3DS come over to the Switch too.
I'd be surprised.
Yeah, especially considering, I mean, what's the point? It's they don't really re-release older Pokemon games at all, and I don't think we're gonna see a remake of them like we did with Diamond and Pearl, let's say. And honestly, considering Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, I don't even want a remake, quite frankly.
Yeah, I mean, here's kind of the thing with Pokemon. It's like they have so many games on 3DS that I think a lot of people hold dear. And I think that it makes a lot of sense to bring one or two of those over at some point. But I mean, I think that's something that you're going to look at sixth or seventh year of Switch 2 is when we might see kind of a remake or a remaster of the 3DS game. I know a lot of people. I think a lot of people. I don't know. This might be controversial. I think a lot of people I know at least really enjoyed Sun and Moon, and I think that bringing Sun and Moon over as a remake or whatever, I think a lot of people would enjoy. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that that's. I wouldn't say that's a priority for Nintendo. They're not going to be focused on bringing over the Pokemon 3DS games, especially because there's so many Pokemon games that are going to be coming to Switch. I mean, we already know ZA, there's going to be Gen 10, all this stuff. I mean, there's so much coming that really that's not the focus for them.
Right. I absolutely agree. And yeah, we're probably not going to get those games. At best, we might get a remake in like a few years, but that seems more like a far off hope. However, sticking with RPGs, there are two games that I really want to see come over to the Switch too. And that is, well, specifically, they released Superstar Saga, a remake of Superstar Saga Mario and Luigi on the 3DS. I don't think we're going to see that because that is already on the Game Boy Advance library. However, what I think we might see is perhaps Bowser's Inside Story, especially with Nintendo's recent trend of remaking beloved entries in their RPG franchises. We got Super Mario RPG, we got Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door, and we got a new Mario and Luigi. If they want to continue that, makes a lot of sense to bring back Bowser's Inside Story.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bowser's Inside Story that released in 2019. It was one of the last big 3DS games that came over before Nintendo just cut support off. And I think that's a game that makes a lot of sense to bring over, especially for, fans of Mario RPGs. I think that Brothership, I don't know. I don't know. I heard all around the door with that one. I heard really solid things and I heard it was absolutely terrible. So I don't know. But I do know that that game is very beloved. And I think that Inside Story would be a great choice to bring over to Switch.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I loved Bowser's Inside Story. It was one of my favorite games as a kid. Yeah, I think that's a game that will definitely have new life on the Switch too. Continuing the RPG trend, this is a third party game, but it's one that I've been wanting to see for a while. I want to see Persona Q and Persona Q2 come to the Switch. Now, considering Persona's recent long term support on the Switch, we got Persona 3 Portable, Persona 4 Golden, and Persona 5 Royal. And considering Q is very much inspired by the Etrian Odyssey series, and those games are already on the Switch, I think it would make a lot of sense. It's more just a question of is there enough interest to put those games on Switch too?
There's always interest. It's Persona 5. I mean, come on. I don't know. I mean, I think that Atlas is probably looking at porting those games. I think it makes a lot of sense for them. I think really the truth of the matter is going to be, are those games going to come to other systems, which they definitely will if they port them. And we saw Tactica, which was kind of a similar style in a way. But yeah, I mean, I think Atlas is no stranger to remasters, as we know. I'm sure they're working on Persona 3 Reload as we speak. So, I mean, I think that that makes a lot of sense for them. And again, it makes more of the library of their past accessible.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. So, what's another game you would really like to see on the Switch too?
Oh man, I mean, for me, it's got to be Luigi's Mansion, just the first one, because it makes me so mad that the 3DS got this really good remake of it, and it's just not come to Switch. And Switch has two HD. We've got Dark Moon, we have three, but we don't have the first one. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Just bring it over, complete the collection, make all of Luigi's Mansion playable. And again, I mean, we know that Next Level is working on Luigi's Mansion 4. I mean, they are. And I think that seriously, bringing that first game over, you'll have the entire series playable. And that also, let's say Luigi's Mansion 4 is further out than we think. Bringing Luigi's Mansion, the first one, on Switch and Switch 2, like this year or next year, would be awesome. And it would also give Switch a game. And I think that's important too, because Nintendo wants to keep that player base happy as long as they can.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's honestly surprising that Luigi's Mansion, the original, hasn't made its way to the Switch yet. So whether it's a sort of mix of what they did with Metroid Prime Remastered, where they bring back the most recent edition, the 3DS version, and sort of update it further, or do a sort of mix between the 3DS version and the GameCube version, either works. So, yeah, I think that's a game that will almost definitely eventually make its way to the Switch too. And speaking of games that I think will eventually make its way to the Switch too, I think Metroid Samus Returns is a no brainer. I don't think we'll get it. I think it'll probably come after Prime 4, and who knows if it'll become and who knows if it will come after whatever new 2D Metroid game is in development. But I think that's a game that will eventually see new life on the Switch too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. You look at the series growth that Metroid has had over the last few years. Dread really catapulted it into the spotlight. We've seen Prime Remastered, Prime 4 is coming. We're going to get Prime 2 and 3. Switch has a lot of Metroid, and it's really beloved. And I think that Samus Returns, bringing that, remastering that would be really great for Metroid as a whole. And, I'm sure they're working on a new 2D Metroid right now. I mean, I'd be shocked if they weren't. But bring that game over. Once again, that's another game that could fit on Switch and Switch 2. And just kind of keep that player base happy with a, remaster of the 3DS game, but also, give people a chance to play it because a lot of people didn't.
Yeah, I think that's probably a game that will definitely come to the Switch. And as you said, it would give a new audience a chance to experience it. And that's something that's very valuable to Nintendo. Nintendo, I think, as we talked about last week, is all about expanding their player base. That is something that is very important to them. And I think with how many Metroid games have made their way to the Switch, Prime Remastered and the soon to be released Prime 4, and all the games released on the Nintendo Switch Online service, I think Samus Returns would make a lot of sense. And in terms of other similar games, I, you know, there is two games that I really want to see make have more traction on the Switch, specifically two franchises, and that is Rhythm Heaven and Professor Layton. Professor Layton, we're already getting a new game. However, I want to see some of those older games from the DS, and in this case, especially the 3DS, make their way to the Switch too. That is a game that is very much deeply entwined with Nintendo's past, and I think that is something that would make a lot of sense on the Switch too. And Rhythm Heaven, we have not gotten a Rhythm Heaven game in a long time. The last one was Megamix on the 3DS. And whether it's a brand new game or Megamix, I really want that franchise to come back.
Yeah, I mean, I think Rhythm Heaven is a game that could really thrive on Switch, right? Especially knowing the player base. And yeah, I mean, Megamix seems like an easy, fair choice. I mean, I would want, give us a physical release, drop it on the Switch. I mean, I would buy it. I think a lot of people would too. And, that's also a franchise that received nothing on Switch so far. So it's interesting to me to consider that as a port for this upcoming system, mainly because, Switch saw bringing back all sorts of franchises that have kind of been dormant and just overlooked over the years. And so I think that's a really good contender to come up and say, hey, we want to bring back Rhythm Heaven. Here's a game. Let's hope it sells well and let's see how it does. But, I think that's a good port of Megamix. I think that's a good way to kind of gamble on the series. I really do.
Yeah, I think having Rhythm Heaven on the Switch too just makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I think it would definitely breathe new life into that franchise, especially with how well rhythm games especially seem to be received. We got all those Miku games and all that, and those clearly seem to be doing well. So yeah, back over to you. What's another 3DS game you would really want to see on the Switch too?
It's got to be Project X Zone. And I think that's going to be a logistical nightmare to bring over. But I think Project X Zone would be awesome.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a game that definitely went under the radar in a lot of ways. And I would love to see that come back and sort of be given new life on the Switch. And that's a game I'm personally not very familiar with. So it'd be very fun to dive into that for the first time.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a game that so many people just did not experience. I mean, you said you didn't experience it. That's completely understandable because it went really under the radar. But I think Project X Zone was really unique because, this is a game developed by Monolith Soft, but it was essentially a crossover between Bandai Namco, Capcom, and Sega. And so it's really cool because you see all these really famous characters from all these different companies come together in what's essentially this, RPG experience. And it's really fun. And I would love to see, X Zone and X Zone 2, and let's make an X Zone 3 maybe. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I think that'd be awesome, especially with how Capcom really seems to be getting back into the swing of crossovers. We just got Capcom Fighting Collection with Marvel, and we're about to get Capcom Fighting Collection 2 with SNK, and of course, all the recent collaborations between Street Fighter and SNK. Maybe throw in SNK there too. Bandai Namco, SNK, Sega, Capcom. Sounds like a match made in heaven to me.
Right. No, I definitely agree. I mean, I think that would be really cool. And honestly, it's kind of one of those things that I just hope happens at some point. But yeah, I mean, beyond that, like, you have any other last minute 3DS games you're thinking of? Because I'm sitting here like my brain is running dry. My brain is really running dry. Do you have any more?
You know what? I said it as a joke at the beginning, but I'll stick to it. I think they should bring back Codename Steam. That was a game that, it had its fans, and maybe it will have new fans on the Switch. I would personally love to play as Abraham Lincoln in an XCOM X esque RTS. That sounds like exactly what the Switch was made for.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's funny because maybe I'm wrong on this, but I feel like barely anyone knows about Codename Steam. Like, I don't see anyone talk about it. And so I think that that's a really fun game that honestly, I don't know, man. I think it's so ridiculous that it would go at home with Switch and just kind of the offerings that Nintendo has on the platform right now.
Yeah, and didn't Lucina show up in it? Or was it Crom?
I I think so. I think it was Lucina. Yeah, it was Lucina. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's coming back to me now. Yeah, because Lucina showed up and you have to play with her amiibo.
Which is so bizarre, maybe considering all the new amiibo. Maybe you can throw in Byleth too. Really have some fun. Throw in the Inkling. I don't know. Let's go crazy with it. Let's make Codename Steam the new killer app on the Switch too. I am starting that campaign today.
Yeah, that's fair enough. You can also bring in Marth, Ike, and Robin too with amiibo. So definitely a Fire Emblem experience for sure.
Yeah, but other than that, I don't think there's much else. And there are certain other games we can get into that have been ported to 3DS from other consoles, Kirby's Epic Yarn, for instance, when we eventually go back in time further to consoles like the DS and the Wii.
Absolutely, and we'll be sure to do that sometime soon. But I think that's going to do it for episode 4 of Switch Point. If you have any games you think we missed, be sure to leave them down in the comments below. And hey, let us know what other games you're hoping to see on Switch too, because there's so much to talk about and we've got months to do it. So we might as well do so with Switch Point. Once again, thank you all so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.